Okay, friends, welcome back. We are here to Pirkei Avot, chapter 3, Mishnah 8. Rabbi Dostai Rabbi Yanai. And tonight we're going to talk about the importance of Torah, which is one of the themes of Pirkei Avot, is the importance of learning Torah, how that's really what guides us as a nation. And we are going to also talk about some of the prerequisites, what is required for the learning of Torah. Mishnah Ches 8, Rabbi Dostai Rabbi Yanai, Mishum Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Dostai, the son of Rabbi Yanai, would say in the name of Rabbi Meir. Does Rabbi Dostai sound familiar? Have you heard of him before? How familiar is his name? Not very familiar. Rabbi Dostai Rabbi Yana is only mentioned twice in the whole Mishnah, once here and once elsewhere. So if you haven't heard of his name, don't berate yourself. But this is the one of two times that he's mentioned in the Mishnah. Both times his teachings are taught in the name of Rabbi Meir, who was his primary teacher. Says Rabbi Dostai Rabbi Yanai, Kol ashocheach davar echad mimishnato. Anyone who forgets davar echad, one manner, even one manner, a single word, it translates here, mimishnato, of his learning, ma'ala alav hakatuv, the Torah considers it ki'ilu mitchayev v'nafsho, as if he had forfeited his life. Wow. Person forgets one aspect of Torah, one teaching of Torah. The Torah considers it as if you're playing with your life. Shenamar, like it says in the Torah regarding Sinai, it says Rak. However, Hishamer lecha, guard yourself, Ushmor nafshecha ma'od, and guard your soul very, very well. Pentishkach advarim asher ra'u einecha, lest you forget that which your eyes have seen. Guard yourself and guard your life. This is life and death. Who was the English football coach who said people think football is a matter of life and death? He said they're wrong. It's much more serious than that. And this is the we're saying over here is that the Torah is not just a matter of life and death; it's much more serious than that. And forgetfulness of Torah is playing with one's life. It makes one liable for the consequences, and you have to guard your life. Now, why is this so? What is so significant? What is so important? What is the great tragedy? Why is forgetfulness of Torah so, such a liability? Why is forgetfulness of Torah such a liability? What do you think? Ben, what do you think?
Off the top of my head, it seems like Torah is a bridge to understanding God and the divine itself. So forgetting that, it's kind of distancing yourself from God.
Beautiful, beautiful. So the Torah is our lifeline. The Torah is our lifeline. And when we forget the Torah, it's not that just like, oh, there's something, we learned something and we forgot it. But we have a lifeline and a bridge, like you said beautifully, and a river and a flow. And when we cut that off, we lose part of that flow. And that flow is our life. So there's a number of aspects to this. The first is that Torah is not casual. Torah is not casual. Torah is very, very serious. In other words, the consequences of our studies, the idea of our studies and the knowledge of Torah, Torah laws, of Torah's applications, they're highly consequential. So, and if a person is casual about it and forgets their Torah, they misapply their Torah. So they that can have a very significant and a very adverse outcome. You know, it was when the I think it was when the Apollo mission, it was right before they launched the first moonwalk. So the final mission, right before, was when they had orbited the moon. They had orbited the moon really, and this is kind of leading up to the moonwalk itself. And there had, at that time, the world was so excited about and this, those who remember the whole kind of space race and the John F. Kennedy's pledge to walk the moon and put a man on the moon by the end of the century was really motivating the country, and there was a lot of excitement about this. And at that time, there was a Chabad rabbi who was hosted on a call-in, on a call-in radio program, and one of the callers asked him. He said, why is this Judaism and Torah's law so strict? He says, if somebody, lights a match and they just light their cigarette on Shabbat, they can be liable for the death penalty. It says, it says just because they violated the Shabbat, somebody just went for a smoke on Shabbat, and they can have, they can be liable for stoning. This is what it says in the Torah. And the rabbi was, he spoke and he addressed the fact that it has to be done with intent to violate the Shabbat, and one has to be warned, and this is not just a casual act. That he really spoke about the idea, but the next day, this was the day after they had actually made this kind of this orbit around the moon. The Rebbe gave a talk, and the Rebbe said that he got a report about this rabbi's call-in question about what is so significant about lighting a match on Shabbat and having a little smoke on Shabbat. And he said that, the rabbi gave an answer, but it wasn't the full answer. It wasn't the full-throated answer. And the rabbi said, we have an example now with the recent, with the Apollo mission. And he says that imagine that somebody would be in the Apollo and, they're orbiting they're watching this as the Earth from a distance, and it's so beautiful. And they say, well, wouldn't this be a wonderful time just to strike a match and take a little smoke, just take it all in. Wouldn't that be beautiful? And what would happen if they did that?
Boom.
What would happen? Boom, exactly. What happened is all the investment, all the lives, all of what the nation had been working so hard would just go up in smoke, because they are in a very controlled environment. And in that type of controlled environment, so the effects, it's not because they strike a match and therefore there's a great hand that comes down and punishes them, but the effects, the consequences of their actions is so severe, so significant in that controlled environment that taking away, just burning up some of the oxygen and the oxygenation of the whole capsule is dependent in this very, very controlled environment. So the Rebbe said that when we are here in this world, it's not that Shabbat is Hashem says, smoking on Shabbat, boom, a hand from heaven comes down. You have to understand that we don't see it in the same way, but on a spiritual level, we are in a very controlled and a very specific in a capsule, in a world that is designed that our every action really, really counts, and it really matters. And if it's and the Torah is our guide, is our instruction book. And so on Shabbat, we don't smoke on Shabbat, right? Because on Shabbat we are the Torah says that this is a day that we have to refrain from doing such things, and Torah understands kind of what's happening in the world, what's the environment of the world. So forgetfulness of Torah can have very, very severe consequences. In other words, and it's not a casual study. Torah is not a casual study. It's not just something. It's not a coffee book, that you put in on your coffee table or something like that. The Torah is a very serious. We approach it as a real student. Like just like imagine somebody is going off to Doctors Without Borders, right? And they're going to be, they're not going to have access to all of their surgical equipment and all of their cameras and all of their technology and all of their double checking and all of the, ability. And they're going to be out in the field and they're going to need to make decisions. And they really want to make sure that they remember exactly, what is what and where is, where and how and what medications they have at their disposal and what type of things, because it's a life and death situation. They understand that they're going to be making serious decisions, and these decisions are going to have a great significance. Our decisions in our life are very, very serious. So we approach Torah not just as an armchair study, but we approach Torah as a study, very, very serious study. I remember many years ago, my colleague Rabbi Dov Bialu at the Chabad of Reed, he brought a number of students for Shabbat to stay with us. They stayed with us, and I'm going to go Shabbat. And at that time, these students were in a humanities course, and they were learning, and they were reading classic works. And they had just so happened that on that Shabbat, they had an assignment that they were supposed to read Pirkei Avot. They were supposed to read Ethics of Our Fathers, which we're studying now. And I thought to myself, I said, how in the world do you read Pirkei Avot in one Shabbat? I said, here we are. Look at this. We're 5-6 weeks into this course, and we haven't even gotten through a single chapter. Usually in an hour session, we study maybe one Mishnah, maybe two Mishnahs. How do you read it all? But the thing is that when you read something with seriousness and we get into it and we understand and we look at what it means, we approach it. And we approach it with its full significance. If we would just kind of just read it as, well, a literary work, yeah, if it's a very short literary work, that could just be read in a weekend. But it's not a literary work. It's a very, very serious instruction guide. That's one aspect of this Mishnah. Another aspect of this Mishnah is that Torah is similar to what Ben said. It's not only an instruction guide, but the Torah is also a flow of divine energy. We say in our prayers, we say, Ki heim chayenu, they are our life. V'orach yameinu, the length of our days. Uvahem nehege yomam v'layla. And in them, in the words of Torah, we will studiously apply ourselves day and night. This is our life. Torah is, what is our life? What is life? What is life? What is life of a Jew? Life is meaning, is vitality, it's not just living, it's not just having a pulse. Like the famous story, the first Rebbe of Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, he had a student, Rabbi Yukusil, they called him Rabbi Yukusil of Lepla. And he once told him, he said, Rabbi Yukusil, he says, I want to give you a blessing of a long life. So Rabbi Yukusil said, now normally a Rebbe gives a blessing of a long life. You don't bargain. Who doesn't take a blessing? Long life, excellent. But he says, he conditions. He says, Abernish puya sheyarim. But he says, but I don't want peasant years. I don't want years that are empty of content. I don't want years that are devoid of purpose. He says, I want years that are full of meaning. Like they say that you can't control, you don't have control over the days of your life, the amount of days in your life. We don't really have control. But you know what we do control is the life in our days, how much life there is in our days. So Torah is the flow. Torah is the divine connection. Torah is what it's the true life of the Jew. It's the sustenance, it's the lifeline, it's the vitality, it's the purpose, it's the why, it's what pulsates the Jew, gives them a mission, a purpose, a reason, a bounce in their step. Study of Torah, the carrying out Hashem's will, the idea that this is what makes, this is the liveliness of life. This is the liveliness itself. So Rabbi Dostoi Barabianai says that when we forget Torah, it's not just that we're forgetting a teaching, we're forgetting a concept, we're forgetting but rather we are disconnecting from life itself. We are a little bit less alive. We're a little bit less alive. So there's the beauty of and the life worth living. And finally, commentators point out that Rabbi Dostoi, the Rabbi Yanai, he says, Kol hashocheach davar echad mimishnaso. Anyone who forgets davar echad. Now, davar echad means, what does davar echad mean?
One word.
One, davar means a word. Echad, what does echad mean?
One.
One. It's not just that you forget the one word, but you forget the oneness in the word. If a person is studying Torah and they forget the davar echad, they forget that this is the word of the one. They forget the oneness, the unity, the singularity, the godliness that exists in Torah. If a person forgets the davar echad mimishnato, then Ma'ala alav hakatuv, the Torah considers it ki'ilu mitchayev benafsho. The Torah considers it as if they're liable. In other words, study itself, Torah itself, it's not an academic pursuit. It's not a philosophical or intellectual pursuit. It is a study and it is a connection to the divine. So we cannot forget the davar echad. We cannot forget the oneness that exists in our teachings. Okay. Now he finishes off, he continues to the Mishnah and he says, Yachol, you might think, Afilu takfa alav mishnato. This applies also to one who has forgotten because his studies has proved too difficult for him. In other words, what if you're trying, but it's hard for you to remember. You know, the Talmud says an interesting thing. The Talmud says, actually, I think it's a Medrash. The Medrash says that in the beginning, when Moshe was given the Torah, he was studying the Torah, umishtakha, he was forgetting the Torah. He could not remember the Torah in the beginning because a human cannot understand and cannot take the godly wisdom. As a matter of fact, try to put an infinite amount of water in a glass. Can't do it. It says, until God gave it to him, gave him Torah as a gift. But we have to be given the Torah as a gift. So you might think that even somebody who is trying, but they're forgetting. It's too difficult. So there's such a severe consequence. Talmud Lomar, so the Torah says, lest they be removed from your heart all the days of your life. Lest it be removed. This obligation, this liability is only if you deliberately remove them from your heart, or if you're careless. In other words, if you're not because it's too difficult, but you're careless and you allow the Torah to be forgotten. The Talmud in Tractate Chagiga tells us an interesting story. It says that the Talmud says that there was a fellow and his name was Bar Hey. But he's actually not a fellow, he was a great scholar. Why is his name Bar Hey? Because he was a convert. And who is the father of the converts? When a convert gets an aliyah, who do you whose name do you use as the father? Whose name?
Oh,
Abraham.
Abraham. And whose name do you use as the convert's mother?
Sarah.
Sarah. And Abraham and Sarah both receive a hey in their name. Avram, he was first called Avram, and then he becomes Avraham. First, Sarah's name was Sarai, and then she becomes Sarah. So Avraham and Sarah, they receive a hey in their name. And so he's a convert, so they call him Bar, the son of Hey, of the Hey and the Hey, Avraham and Sarah. And he asks Hillel, the famed Hillel, Amar le Bar Hey Hillel. He says that the pasuk, there's a verse in Malachi where Malachi says, "V'shaftem ur isem." The Malachi says that you will come and you will look bein tzaddik l'rasha. You'll see the difference of the tzaddik and the rasha. The tzaddik, of course, being the righteous person, the rasha being the wicked. And then it says, "Bein oved Elokim lasher lo avado," between the one who serves God and the one who doesn't serve Him. So he says there seems to be a redundancy. It says you'll inspect between the tzaddik and the rasha, and between the one who serves God and the one who doesn't serve Him. Is that not redundant? So Hillel says no. The servant of God and the one who doesn't serve God are both tzaddikim. They're both righteous people. Righteous people. So if they're both righteous, what does it mean that one serves God and one doesn't serve God? So Hillel explained. He says, Eino doma shona pirko mea piyamim. Shona pirko mea piyamim v'echad. Says that you cannot compare the standard in those times, in Talmudic times. This was before it was print, and before there was as many books available as we have, and the style and the study of Torah was much more dependent on memory. At those times, the standard was when you learned your teachings, 100 times. You reviewed the teachings 100 times because you had to retain the teachings. It was very much, you had to carve it into your memory. The standard was to review one's teachings 100 times. But if a person reviews their teaching 100 times, they're not a servant of Hashem. Why? They're not considered, they haven't served God, because 100 times was the standard. That's what's done. You review it 100 times. Who is the servant of God? He says, the one who serves or reviews his teachings, the one who reviews the teachings, the 101 time. 101 time, now you've gone beyond the norm. Now you've given something even more. 101, that's the one who's called the servant of God. So Barheye says to Hillel, because of one time, that's the difference between a servant of God and someone who's not a servant, just because the one time. So Hillel says, yes, just because of the one time. And he says, he says, go out and check what happens in when you want to hire a donkey. Before they had Uber, before they had Lyft, you had to go out and you had to hire a donkey. And how did the donkeys, if you would hire a donkey ride, how did it work? So if you wanted to travel up to 10 parsa, you paid 1 zuz. But if you wanted to travel an 11th parsa, how much would you pay? How much?
2 zuz.
2 zuz. Why? Because you are going beyond the norm. The norm is a standard ride, standard fare, like they have, in the city limits, whatever it is. 10 zuz, 10 parsa, 1 zuz. But when you go beyond and you're trying and you're going 11 parsa, that's already a extra long ride. 2 zuz. Said Hillel that the 100 times of learning, that's considered the kind of the standard fare. That's the standard ride. You want to go beyond the standard ride and you learn it 101 times. Now you're considered, now you're serving Hashem. Now you're going beyond the requirement. Be what they say, beyond the letter. So this is the approach. The idea of Torah was that we have to carve it into our souls. We have to carve it into our hearts. We have to not just study Torah as a detached pursuit, but Torah is something that we study with a deep sense of appreciation for its critical nature of what it's telling us, the importance of what it's telling us, of the fact that it is a lifeline itself, and therefore a lifeline to Hashem itself, the fact that it is the word of Hashem, and therefore the Torah study was done and is done to a point that even if we're going to learn less, but it's more important to maintain and to hold on to a smaller amount of Torah than it is to just cover a lot of Torah and just kind of let it flow right through you. This is the teaching of Rabbi Dustai Rabbi Yana. Okay. Mishnah Tes 9. Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa. Basha, you want to read it? Do you want to read this? Rabbi Hanina, the son of Dosa?
Okay. Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa would say, one whose fear of sin takes precedence to his wisdom endures. But one whose wisdom takes precedence to his fear of sin, his wisdom does not endure.
Beautiful. So this is again a very, very strong and important Mishnah. In our previous Mishnah, we had learned about the importance of Torah study and how vital it is. Torah is our life. It's what puts life into our years, and so on and so forth. Here, Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa says that in addition to our Torah, or as a prerequisite for proper Torah study, there has to be, even preceding our Torah study, there has to be something before. There has to be a fear of sin. You see, intelligence itself, intellectual exploration, curiosity, theory, philosophy, these are they could be very, very powerful tools, and they could also lead us to very, very dangerous places. Every movement, even the most dangerous movements, they have strong ideas, specifically the most dangerous movements, right? A movement like communism. I don't know how many people died, like almost 200 million people were killed in the name of communism. But it was an idea, this compelling idea, this idea that people came up with. We have to create a new society, a fresh world. And for the sake of communism, it was, appropriate that anybody that was going to get in its way would just be eliminated. Nazism was really based on scientific racism, right? There was a real theory, there was a real philosophy of scientific racism, of the idea of taking genetics very, very seriously, and understanding that we can't allow people to, poison the gene pool. And there's all this, there's this whole philosophy and this whole theory and it begins with the euthanasia program and it begins with the program of making sure that people aren't able to procreate because they have, different types of, illnesses or deformations that shouldn't, ruin the gene pool. These are ideas. These are ideas. And these ideas are very, very dangerous ideas. Millions and millions of people died because of these terrible, bad ideas. When we begin and we say that, the most important thing is the human mind, exploration, curiosity, understanding, science. So I say, follow the science. It's like I say, follow, that's what racism was about. It was about following the science, right? Science says that we shouldn't ruin the gene pool. Science says that we should make a stronger race. Well, the idea is that if we'll just allow ourselves, and if the beginning of our exploration is the chachma itself, is wisdom itself, is understanding is itself. So one whose wisdom takes precedence to sphere of sin. If a person begins with his wisdom does not endure, can lead a person very, very far away. That's why Jewish men, what do we wear on our head? What is this called? What sits on our head? What is it called?
Kippah.
It's called a kippah, which means a dome, and it's also called a yarmulke. What is a yarmulke? The word yarmulke it's made up of two words, yarei malka, which means to have fear of the king, to recognize that even our head, which is the highest part of and the most human part of the human being, even that is also bare. Even that is also short. Even that needs a cover. We need a head covering. That also needs a cover, namely the yarmulke, because it's a reminder that with our head, we can go very, very, very far off track. Go very far off track. Our heads can take us far away. Rather, we need to begin with a yorei malka. We have to begin with a sense of fear of the king. And that's what he says. Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa says, Kol sheyirat chat'o kodemes l'chachma. If a person has a fear of sin, person has a relationship with Hashem, person understands that we are here to serve Hashem and to be in the service of Hashem, and they have a fear of distancing themselves, of detaching themselves. If that is first, then chachmato miskayemes, then their wisdom will endure. They'll find and they will stay on the track of true wisdom, of good wisdom, of wisdom that will help them find that connection, understand the Torah, discover the answers that they're looking for, how to address their situations and whatnot. Then they'll be able to do so with the power of using the exploration of the chachma. But if a person puts their wisdom first, ein chachmato mitkayemes, their wisdom will not endure. It won't survive. It's going to actually, it will lead them greatly and far, and it could lead them very far astray. There's a very beautiful story of the third Rabbi of Chabad. His name was Rabbi Menachem Mendel, known as the Tzemach Tzedek. And Tzemach Tzedek has there's a young man in front of him who is a very gifted and talented, intelligent young man, but he has lost his sense of connection with, he lost that kind of vibrancy and that meaning, and that he had before with the Torah and with Chassidut and with the lifestyle that he had been living. So anyhow, this young man, he's sitting in front of the Tzemach Tzedek, and he is now living kind of a very different lifestyle, and he is very involved in horse betting and racing, and the Rebbe turns to him, and the Rebbe says, "Tell me," he says, "Well, what's so great about a fast horse?" He says, "A fast horse. I mean, if imagine you're on a fast horse, and if it goes off the path, or if it makes a wrong turn, it can take you so much further away." And the fellow looks at the Rebbe and he says, "Yes, Rebbe." He says, "But it can also come back. It can also come back to the path much quicker." And the Rebbe smiles and he understands. He looks at the fellow, and the fellow begins to understand that this was a metaphor. He's telling him, he said, "You're a very intelligent man, and you're a very wise man, and you have a gift, but that could take you very, very far away. And they can lead you even quicker. It could lead you astray. But it can also bring you back if you begin with the yirat chato, if you begin with the fear of sin, if you have the foundations in place, if you have your yarmulke, your yarei malka, your fear of the king, in other words, and if we begin with the desire and the importance of having a secure and attachment with Hashem, that will that will pave the way and open the way for us to have a meaningful relationship, and finding and using our wisdom and our understanding and our study and our exploration to bring us to the right place. Let's go to Mishnah 10. Mishnah 10. Joel, you want to read 10?
Slow and unmuting there. Okay. English okay?
Yes, please.
Okay. You would also say, one whose deeds exceed his wisdom endures. But one whose wisdom exceeds his wisdom does not endure.
Let's stop over there for a moment. Let's go through this. So this is like a sandwich. Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa told us, he said that one whose wisdom, before he told us that in the prerequisite to wisdom, what has to precede our wisdom is a fear of Hashem. Our wisdom has to be in the service of Hashem, in the service of, and towards the goal of having a relationship with Hashem, of fulfilling the will and the desire of our Creator. And now he comes at it from the other side. He says, he would say, the Torah also has to be lived. It's not just something that has to be that is like we've been saying today. It's not just a detached, an armchair study, but it has to be lived. If your deeds are even more than your wisdom, in other words, it plays out. It plays out that it's not just a concept. It's not just a theory, but it actually plays out in your day-to-day life, and therefore your deeds exceed your wisdom. So then the wisdom will endure. That's a Torah wisdom. A Torah wisdom is one that is rooted on in the fear of God. It is a wisdom that it helps us, and it guides us, and it coaches us in every aspect of our life, and it plays out in our life. It plays out. So, kol shema asav mirubi mechachmato. If your deeds are more than your wisdom, chachmato mitkayam. It's that type of wisdom. But again, if a person is studying Torah and it is not translating into deeds, and it's not translating, and they're talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk. So then, ein chachmato miskayemes, that type of wisdom is not endured. That is not a true wisdom. That's just information. That's just information. We're not looking for information. We're not looking for information. We're looking for, Torah is a lifeline. It's a lifestyle. It's something that affects our every being, our every aspect of our being. This Chanina ben Dosa, who's our teacher tonight in this section, doesn't just teach this, but Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa actually lives this. Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa is a very God-fearing individual. There's incredible stories of who he is as his persona. There's a statement that it says that Kol ha'olam lo nizon ela b'schut chanina beni, that the whole world receives its sustenance. God says there's a heavenly voice. There's a heavenly voice that says the whole world is sustained only in the honor and in the merit of Chanina, of this Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, Chanina beni. The whole world is sustained. Chanina beni, dailo b'kav chruvim. And this Chanina, my son, he only doesn't even need it. He only needs a kav, a very small amount. He needs a bowl of figs. A little bowl of figs, that's all he, or not figs, carrot. That's all he has to, that's all he wants. That's all he wants. But he's a man whose piety brings sustenance, brings blessing to the whole world. There's a very famous story that one time Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa comes home, it's before Shabbat, and his daughter comes and says, we have no oil to light the Shabbat candles. There's a rabbinic instruction that in honor of Shabbat, we're supposed to light candles, famous to light the Shabbos candles. And Rabbi Hanina says, and Rabbi Hanina's daughter says, but there's no oil. So what does Rabbi Hanina respond? Rabbi Hanina responds that we don't have oil, but we have vinegar. They had vinegar in the house. Wine gone bad. And so Rabbi Hanina says, Misha Amar le Shemen Vidlat. The God who says that oil should burn, that oil should be combustible, that oil should give light. Yomer lechometz Vidlat. You light the vinegar. He'll tell the vinegar to give light, to be combustible. Yomer lechometz, he'll tell the vinegar. And that's what his daughter does. His daughter lights the vinegar candles at Shabbat. So these are teachings over here that we have today that are not just the idea of Torah, not just being an armchair study, but the seriousness in our approach to Torah. The idea that every word in Torah is a lifeline to Hashem. And then the idea that our Torah is not just a academic study, but it's based and it's in search of a relationship with Hashem. And therefore, first we have to have a sense of yirat chet, of fear of sin. And finally, the Torah has to translate itself into action, into the life that we live. And we have to have more deeds than action. So this is a very, very beautiful section in the Pirkei Avot over here.